You are listening to the Enormocast.
First came the Archaeopteryx, a compact feathered dinosaur who dared to fly, maybe. But at the very least, they dared to be different with their cute little feathers out there strutting around like primal chickens. Tip of the hat to those mighty but mini mavericks. Then, some 150 million years later, one of them half-pint bosses was dug up, and its rebel attitude inspired the founding of Arc'teryx Equipment. These days, Arc'teryx is known for its own forward-thinking design instincts in apparel. But did you know that it all started with climbing harnesses? That's right. In 1989, the sport was a-changin', and clunky, uncomfortable harnesses were not gonna fly. 36 years later, Arc'teryx has refined their harness offerings to just two flawless designs, the Skaha and the AR395, which is a mouthful. Personally, I'd named it the Bugaboo, but I'm not in charge, am I? The Skaha excels in sport and short climbing, and the AR are all-round, boasts blazonry for big roots and alpine. Both these sleek saddles come from the vapor harness lineage we all remember, where lightweight breathability does not compromise comfort and function. So check out them harnesses hiding amongst all that amazing apparel at Arc'teryx.com or your local shop. And fly off them roots with the same confidence that our little feathered dino friend took to the sky so long ago.
We gotta get Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a
big
house.
place,
Sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats. We really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out. Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by La Sportiva,
Arc'teryx Equipment,
and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
and now we can also thank the chill folks at Yeti. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is October 14th, 2025, about 10:30 a.m. here in Colorado, and this is a tweener from the Enormocast, one of those episodes that goes in between the full episodes. On today's tweener, we have a live podcast recorded at the Arc'teryx Academy in Squamish with Swedish climber Matilda Söderlund. Yes, this was recorded on a bright Friday morning to a smart, well-dressed audience at the Arc'teryx Academy, and I want to thank Arc'teryx for bringing me and Matilda together up there on the main stage. Bringing people together is what that event is all about. And Matilda Söderlund is a bright light of Swedish climbing. She's a former competitor, a sport climber, a trad climber, a big route climber. She also is a gym owner and a creator of a program whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. You'll hear it in the episode, whose focus is bringing other women into climbing. And you, dear listeners, heard a little bit about Matilda Söderlund on a Hazelnuts episode from this summer, episode 309, because Matilda was Anna's partner for Madagascar. We talked a bunch about that on the episode. Also, Matilda has agreed to come back on the show sometime in the future so we can go a little harder, a little more in-depth. But this live one does a good job of covering it. So let's get to it. A live Enormocast rebroadcast from the Arc'teryx Academy in Squamish with Matilda Söderlund. Squamish, Arc'teryx Academy, live podcast. I'm just going to say we have a really good crowd out here today for this thing. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
The best crowd.
The best crowd. This is the best crowd. in Squamish at this moment, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and do a low-tech start to the podcast because I've been doing this for so long, and I've been to a lot of different festivals doing some live podcasts with sketchy AV equipment, so I've gotten used to doing this, and this is no diss on our very professional crew back there. They could have handled this, but I'm going to do it this way, which is the old school way.
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh, yeah, the big
House, we
place
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out. I'll say, you really should.
The hell are you doing?
I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out. No, later, anytime.
Welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is about 10:30 a.m. here in Squamish, BC, and this is episode to be decided of the Enormocast, a conversation with Matilda Söderlund. Welcome, Matilda.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Give it up. Appreciate it. Matilda and I sort of met online in a little event earlier this spring, but the first time we saw each other was yesterday, and I was excited to meet her and sort of put a regular flesh face to the video screen that I saw. You're here in Squamish for the first time, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, how are things going? You've been able to climb for a few days.
First time in Canada, actually, and first time in Squamish, and it's been really amazing so far. I got 3 days of climbing in, and this just seems like such a special place for climbing and for the Arc'teryx Academy, so just really happy to be here.
So what have you been doing? What did you get into over on the cliffs and boulders?
We had a team day out climbing on Tuesday, which was really fun to meet some of the athletes that I haven't met yet on the Arc'teryx team, and I actually got my hardest belay to date. I belayed Jonathan climbing a 9A plus or 515.
I think a lot of people can say that when they belay Jonathan Segrist, right? Your hardest belay. Well done, good job. Did you short him? Was he pleased with your ability to belay him?
Yeah, I think I'm very pleased, actually.
Okay, cool.
And then we visited some other crags, and I had the first day of my clinic yesterday.
Awesome. So, I mean, this is granite, and aren't you used to granite? Is that do you have a lot of granite in Sweden? You're a Swedish climber.
Yeah. So I grew up climbing on granite, so it's a rock type that I really like. I think it's often super interesting climbing and more technical, like sort of the formations of the rock is different.
Let's talk a little bit about the Swedish climbing scene. Tell us a little bit about what's there. I mean, you just mentioned that there's granite. What else do you have? What are the cliffs like? And then we'll get into kind of the culture. I'm kind of interested in the culture and how it reflects on what we think we know about sort of Scandinavian and Swedish culture already. So
it's not like the Alps or like the big mountains. We don't have a strong culture of that type of climbing, but we have a lot of single pitch climbing around the cities and like scattered out in Sweden. And almost everything is granite. And I think the climbing when I started was a really, really niche and small like activity and sport, and then climbing has grown a lot over the past couple of years, and I think it's primarily driven by climbing gyms opening. So the scene is sort of getting a lot bigger, and especially the indoor climbing scene, and the outdoor scene is growing too.
So is it like, what kind of climbing? Are we talking about a lot of traditional climbing and bolted climbing, bouldering? What are we looking at style-wise?
Yeah, so we have a lot of bouldering, quite a lot of hard bouldering too. And sport climbing-wise, on the East Coast where I live, it's a lot of sport climbing, not that hard, but it's a lot. And on the West Coast, the trad climbing scene is really good and really strong. I'd say it's a world-class climbing place.
We have like this obsession with Vikings, and I was kind of wondering because, like, I found that there's, like, some continental Europeans, the Germans in particular, have sort of this very deep interest in, like, American cowboy culture that, like, it goes beyond, like, what we here in the U.S. have, you know? I think they're, like, really interested in it, and there's, like, I found out there's, like, country bars in Germany, and they line dance and, like, do the whole thing with cowboy hats. I know we're super into Vikings. Is it, like, are Vikings something that you guys think about? I mean, it's sort of Norway, Scandinavia, kind of Swedish thing. Like, where does the Viking culture come into your life and climbing is what I'm getting at.
I mean, to be honest, sorry to disappoint you, it's not something that we think and talk about a lot.
Well, you should start. I watched this video of you climbing a very difficult trad route where you got attacked by bees.
Yeah.
She climbed 13C trad route, and then luckily I think it had eased up, but at the top of her actual send go, she gets attacked by bees and stung on her way out to, I guess your probably hardest trad send at the time, or close to it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so well done on that.
Oh, thank you.
But your partner, I asked her earlier, I was like, who's that guy? Like, he totally looks like a Viking. And it turns out, what's his name?
Thor.
Yeah, so it worked out. Anyway, I want to hang out with that guy. Yeah, anything else like about the culture that you find is sort of distinct or maybe characterizes it a little bit?
The climbing culture is also sort of a reflection of the Scandinavian society in a way, because we have this thing called the jantelagen, or the jante law, which basically means that you should never think that you're better than anyone. So it's sort of like you don't really brag about your sends, and it's sort of frowned upon. And I think that's led to that there's a really strong underground scene, especially on the west coast of Sweden, in the trad climbing area.
That's actually an old trend in a lot of climbing areas. And I think in North America, we inherited it from the British, the understated stiff upper lip, kind of like you don't mess around. And it does seem to be attached a lot of times to trad climbing in particular. But how does that reflect on you? I mean, a lot of times I think in climbing, and I've done this show for a long time, is people are super psyched for professional climbers and they want to see everybody send, but then there's always this kind of undercurrent of like, well, why is that person sponsored? Or, you know, last time I saw them, I didn't think they were climbing that hard, kind of a thing. Like, does that cross over to your life as a professional climber, this idea that you're not supposed to be out there talking about your climbing? Because, I mean, that's your job to do that.
Yeah, and honestly, I've thought about that, but I don't think of it that way. And I've always, like, when sort of mainstream media has picked up on my climbing achievements and it's sort of gone outside the world of climbing in Sweden, I've always seen it as a way to sort of promote the sport and like make it bigger. And because climbing doesn't get that much attention in Sweden, so I've always seen it as a way to like do something for the sport.
Another answer to the question would be like, I don't care what everybody else thinks, so that's fine too.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's funny because the promoting of the sport also can get pushback from those same people. Like, they wanted to keep their little thing, you know, hidden in the, you know, on these remote cliffs and don't want anybody else to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I do. There's definitely that sort of discussion in Sweden as well. But as a whole, I think people are really psyched that the sport is growing.
Let's talk a little bit about your history. You were a indoor kid. That's how you found it, which is, you know, as the years go by and I do this show more and more, that's very typical of having walked into a gym as a kid and found that you just were drawn to it. Can you remember that time? Can you remember little Matilda strolling into a gym for the first time and what you felt?
It was actually at a birthday party, and I had no relation to climbing whatsoever before that. So I remember the feeling when I first climbed, and it was like something just clicked. Like I felt like I was able to just move my body without thinking. And I do think I still, to a certain extent, have that feeling when I climb today, which I think is kind of cool. But I didn't think climbing was a sport or like something that you could do. I thought it was more like one of those activities you do at a birthday party, like
Sure.
bowling or
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Bouncy castle.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? Yeah, totally.
So it wasn't until I entered a competition like 3 weeks later that I realized that climbing was an actual sport.
Yeah, I mean, I saw, there's some old pictures of you, and yeah, I mean, you were a little bit built for it. Were you an athletic kid at all?
Yes, I loved doing sports as a kid, and I did I did everything, like track and field, soccer, tennis, ballet, and then I found climbing and I quit everything else.
How deep did you get into the competition climbing? I know you were like a national champion and things like that. How long did that last, and how deep in it were you as a competitor?
I'd say very deep in it. Like I entered my first competition after 3 weeks of climbing, and then that was what I wanted to do in climbing and I did that for the next 10 years. Starting with national competitions and then doing like the European youth comp circuit, and then I did 1.5 or 2 years at the World Cup stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting when I kind of was glancing around at your media. I had to go way back and dig in deep to find a lot of information about your comp climbing. So you definitely transitioned either away from it or into outdoor climbing. So tell me about that, because to me that evolving to where you are now is kind of the interesting part of anybody's story, or transitions and evolution and things like that. And before we get to sort of a very existential moment after school, what happened to your sort of thrills or your interest in comp climbing?
I think that I competed for, so many years at the time, like basically my whole climbing life, and it was always sort of lonely because competition climbing was never that big in Sweden at the time. And I was going to the competitions alone, or like at the World Championships, my mom was there. Like we didn't really have a national coach or anything. And then I think I got sort of burnt out from competing. It wasn't that fun anymore. And I think unless you're 100% motivated to compete, it's hard to do it. And I sort of felt like I needed to, or I wanted to take a step back from competing, but then I didn't know what climbing would be, because all I knew about climbing was basically competition climbing.
There's obviously, like, it's great to win, but most people are there because it's such a community. But it sounds like that was like a piece that you sort of struggled with, is what was the community, or was there like a local scene in your gym that was your sort of support group, even if they didn't come with you to these international competitions?
Yeah, for sure. I always think I had a great community in Stockholm, and then as soon as I entered the World Cup stage, everything got a bit more serious on like the actual competition stage. So I had all my friends from like international friends from doing the youth comp circuit, and then everyone else had their big teams with coaches and physios and sports psychologists, and then I was there like alone. And it just wasn't that fun, like traveling when you're like 21 years old. I traveled alone to Colombia to compete in the World Games when I was 21.
That's cool. In its own way.
It's cool, but it wasn't that great, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit worrisome. Did it peter out, or did you just like, I'm good? Did you have a last hurrah, throw your chalk bag on the mat and walk out? Or what did it look like to move it out of your life a little bit? To
be honest, it wasn't like I said to myself, I'm done competing. It was more like I want to take a step back. So I applied to university and got in. So I decided to do that. And that sort of became, I don't know, like an excuse to myself to do that, because I think it would have been hard to otherwise stop competing. But I have done some competitions after that, but it just hasn't been my focus.
Right. I asked you what you got your degree in. It was business economics. And you didn't seem very enthused about that when you told me that. Another thing that I saw online, which is really something I was very interested in, even though it was just a small part of a video or something. But you mentioned having this existential crisis of sorts because you had graduated, you were working, and you were working. Your only job, you said, was this job that required you to work 12 hours a day or more every single day, and you had a moment in the middle of the night or early in the morning when you were basically like, F this. This is not awesome. I'm not happy. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yes, so I studied business and economics, and I think, I didn't know what I wanted to do. After that, and it was a highly competitive environment, and I got really carried away, I think, and also I didn't know what I wanted climbing to be in my life at that point, so I was like, I'm going to do, what's the hardest thing to do here? And that was to work in finance.
So wait, so you go from competitive climbing to competitive studying to competitive working?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was like...
a little trend.
Yeah. Then I matured and could make my own decisions. But that was... So this is also around like 2017, 2018. So anyways, I worked then for a year in finance at private equity company, which I despise today. And then there was this moment where I'd been working from 9 in the morning until 4 a.m. And I was in this taxi on the way home, and I was like, I cannot do this with my life.
So where was climbing in your life at that point? Like at that moment, was it in the, did you think it was in the rear view? Was it super hobby kind of climbing? What was it at that moment?
I think it was my free zone, actually. I think it's interesting because I put a lot of pressure on myself when I was competing, and I think it was a big transition, when I studied and when I worked for that year, climbing became the complete opposite. It became the place where I could, I felt no pressure, and I got the chance to rebuild my relationship to climbing, and I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time. So climbing was sort of my free zone where I didn't feel any stress or any pressure, and I would just, felt like climbing was this sort of meditative zone for me. So I was climbing quite a lot, but just as much as I had time for at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would... you quit this job, or you eventually quit it. Maybe you didn't just storm out that day or whatever. I don't know. Did you? Did you just go in there and,
No, I finished. I had this. I did this internship. So then I finished that, and then I was out.
Oh, you were an intern too. That's even worse.
The lowest.
Yeah, but then you start to see this glimpse, and I'm always interested in this question with people who become professionals. You see this glimpse or this future eventually of this can be my job. But I'm always a little bit wondering about how that can be fraught with what you just said. Okay, climbing now is this meditative thing for me, and it's my stress relief away from my job. But what if I turn it into a job? What kind of pressures does that come with? So before we get there, what did you see as the path? And it probably took a few years, but suddenly you're here with us as a professional climber. Not suddenly, but we're looking at you in a whole different light as far as that's concerned. So what was that in your mind? You're a Swedish climber, it's a small scene, but I have these possibilities.
So I think the only thing I knew was that I wanted to build my life around climbing, and that was sort of what was guiding me. And I had no idea that I would be here today and at the Arc'teryx Academy and be in the position I am in today. But I knew that life is short, and I want to do follow my passion if that's possible and build my life around climbing. So that's the only thing that I was thinking and that I was sure of at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that we started with this idea that you're in this culture where you're not supposed to pretend like you're better than people. But at the same time, for better or worse, like becoming a professional climber does come with, you having to show some level of ability and rise to those kind of challenges. So how did that kind of mix in your head? Like, were you able to feel yourself excel and realize that maybe you were good enough, to be a professional climber, and or were there climbs that sort of were benchmarks as far as like getting people's interest in you as someone to represent them?
I've never I think thought of those type of like external elements in that way. I just knew that I wanted to climb, and actually my vision was maybe not to become a professional climber. I mean, I climbed professionally for 2 years, like when I was doing competitions.
Sure.
So it wasn't, that would be something completely new. And also I think when you when you're used to this sort of jante law, you also learn how to not care so much about it.
Right. What were some of those benchmarks, though? What were some of those moments where you started to excel in a way that maybe even surprised yourself? And also, where you started, this is now outdoor climbing that you're focusing on. Tell me about that. We have our moments as climbers, even as amateurs, where we were like, wow, that was something. Like, I just did something pretty cool for me.
Well, first of all, so my initial plan was to start a climbing gym in Stockholm, and then sort of go from there. But that took many, many more years. So I think becoming an athlete again was the thing that happened first. But I set this goal that I wanted to climb 9A in 2017, and so in 2019 I did that.
So translate it for us North Americans. What's 9A? Is it 14D?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I don't all have all those grades in my head, but that one I do. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was also a transition to climb more outdoors and sort of explore that and get into projecting routes, which was something that I'd never done before, and sort of learn this whole new part of climbing. And also to travel the world and sort of climb at new places and be part of another community in climbing. But I spent quite a lot of time in an area called Frankenjura in Germany, which is an acquired taste of climbing. It's mostly really, really small holds and pockets and monos.
Very famous for Action Direct, if people are into history.
Yes, which is the world's first 9A.
Right.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time there, and then I found this route that I knew that I wanted to try. So in October of 2019, I arrived in Frankenjura, and it was, I think it's one of the most memorable climbs of my life so far, because it felt like the stars just aligned. Like, it had been raining for several weeks when we got there, and the first day that we were climbing was the first day without rain, and the route that I wanted to try was the only one that was dry. And then I think it's one of the best climbs that I've ever done.
When you were a comp climber, and climbing in general revolves around a ton of failure. You lose your competitions, you put all this training in, and then you come out with a result that you didn't expect. Like, how, I want to get back to this thing, this will go there, but how are you in general with that kind of like disappointment in terms of, dealing with it? Some people can be very hard on themselves. Are you able to walk away from it and be like, well, next time, kind of a thing? Like, what were you like back in the comp days?
Oh, I think, I'd be like super frustrated for sure. But also I think I was able to use it as a spark to motivate myself and like come back and like do better.
And how did that translate into projecting? Because you just said like you had to kind of figure out what it meant to project, because that's not a part of comp climbing at all. It's the exact opposite of that. And that's filled with its own frustrations. And this, this one turned out great. You sent it. but there's all the days when you don't send, or you almost send, or you feel like you should have, or the trip's coming to an end, you know, the last day, best day kind of thing. Yeah, well, tell us about the process of your brain when you're challenged that hard to send something.
Yeah, I think projecting is super interesting, and it's fascinating how so much comes down to the mental part of climbing, and as you say, it's so different to competing, because then you have your one try and you try to do your best in that. Whereas when you can try multiple times over and over again, it all comes down to how are you able to execute like with everything that you've learned on the wall, and like what type of mindset is required for that.
What about your style? Like I kept watching these things, and you know, it gets hard and you make some noises, but you're actually, a lot of times you're a very quiet climber, I think anyway. And I didn't watch every single video I could of you, but I was like, she's extremely smooth and pretty quiet while she's climbing. It's not a lot of Andra type shouting. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you think your sort of strengths are as your style as you push yourself on these incredibly hard routes.
No, I think I am an extremely quiet climber.
Yeah.
But
okay, I wasn't wrong then.
Internally.
I kept like literally, I'm like putting the volume up on the trad climbing one. I'm like, there's music going. I'm like, maybe they don't have like sound on. But no, she was just quietly cranking up these hideously hard routes.
No, but I think internally there's like a lot going on. I just like to dig deep within myself, and there's not that much that comes out from that.
Right.
Yeah. But the style that I like is like, I like being able to feel like smooth and execute well on the wall. And I love being in this flow state where I'm just like climbing and there's nothing else going on.
What about as you became a outdoor rock climber? Did you have mentors or anybody who could help you with like working on that state of mind, or did it just kind of come naturally to how you approach these routes?
I've been really fortunate to have some really good mentors in Sweden that's helped me a lot. Like my coach Carlos, and like one of my first coaches when I was a kid, Peter. So that's been great. But then I think I've also learned a lot from climbing just with other climbers. The first route that I ever projected was actually a route called Golden for a Moment at the cathedral in Utah, Arizona. And Jonathan Sigris was actually there at the same time. So I climbed a little bit with him. And I remember like realizing how hard he was able to try. And like, you know, climbing, like it really, really mattered to him, like to put his best effort in every try. And I think I learned a lot from that. So that was one of those, like, it was the first project I ever had. And the second to last day had this amazing try on the route, but fell on the last move. And then I came back the very last day and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go up there, because we were filming also. It's like the first film project I ever did. And I was just thinking, I'm just going to go up there and like look good for the camera. And then the pressure was suddenly off and I sent the route.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah. But I realized that, you know, the difference was that I'd sort of accepted that I might not do the route, and that made me focus more on the climbing, which is what you should be doing. And I wasn't thinking about the outcome as much, like sending or not sending.
First of all, just how hard is that?
It's a 514B.
Okay, her first project. I didn't know. I watched that video too, but I had no idea that was the first thing that you really had put your head against like that. Mr. Honnold was there too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, so there's quite a crowd, and then some pressure from having the film crew there, and you know, a classic last go best go, because you were apparently had to leave.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that also feels like such a long time ago. But yeah, Alex Honnold was there as well, and Jonathan Segrist, who was like quite the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, there is pressures that go with being. I've been very interested in that over the years, of being a professional climber, and it can be just logistical like that. Like I've asked all these people to be here to film me, and now I'm not producing what I'm supposed to produce, in a sense. How are you with that kind of pressure? I mean, you've now been doing it for years. I imagine when you first were doing it, it felt like a bigger deal than it probably does now, because you're growing up and matured and are like, well, so you win some, you lose some. But yeah, how do you feel about that as a pro again?
I mean, I think that sort of comes with the job, and it's part of the game, because you can also, you can have a normal job and just climb really hard on the weekends. But I think when you've chosen to be an athlete, it's sort of something you have to deal with.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you like it.
Of course, like, I feel pressure, but I think it's like you just have to learn how to deal with that. And I honestly don't mind it that much.
So another thing that you have gone forward with as your career has matured and you've gotten, things off the ground, you've got your gym off the ground, or more than one. Is there more than one, or just the one?
It's one currently, so we'll see in the future.
But there's a lot of this outreach in terms of being a role model as a woman, and I've talked about this at length on the show with a number of people, going back to years and years ago with Hazel Finlay, who was this really good climber, but she kind of wasn't accepted, not just because she was a woman, but how she looked and things like that. She felt a little bit dismissed. What's been your experience with that? I don't know what the culture is as far as equality in Sweden, but yeah, what's been your experience with being accepted by climbing and your accomplishments being, looked at on their face without sort of caveats about whether you were a woman or not?
Well, I think first of all that I was always, or almost always, the only girl or like woman growing up, like in Sweden, training and climbing outdoors, and like I was always the only one in the group of guys. And then I think I was always accepted because I do think that climbing is, it's really meritocratic. So since I did well, I was always accepted by everyone. But then I think that climbing still today is like a male-dominated space. And I've had my fair share of like experiences with that. For example, when I was climbing this route in northern Spain with Sasha de Julian and Brett Harrington. And on like our very last night in civilization before leaving on our expedition, we had like a couple of mountain guys that were going to help us just get to the wall and like where the climbing is. And they were all men. And on that night, they were like making bets that we would be rescued by a helicopter within a week. And then when we got to the climbing, they were like, oh, girls, like, this is really technical, like really special type of climbing. Like, it's really difficult. Maybe you should just pick another route. Like, this is maybe just too hard for you. And then we sent the route.
Yeah, they sent the route. So.
And that would not have happened if we were 3 male pro climbers. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and I think, it's like, oh yeah, you brush it off, but it also sort of affects you. And especially that was like a really high pressure situation, I think, because we were doing something completely new, and like the route, was really challenging. So I think it got to us.
Well, let's get back to then what you've been doing. You have a program, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, even though you taught it to me earlier. So I'll let you do it.
So I started this community initiative for women in climbing, and it's called Bergskultur. It sort of translates to mountain culture, because I for the most part felt accepted by the climbing community, even though I was always the only girl or woman. But over the years, I also think you have to see things from not just your own perspective, because I know that many women around me were like suffering in a different way than I was. And I also felt like I'm super grateful for the position I am in today, and I feel really privileged to be here. So I also wanted to give something back to the community. So then I wanted to start this space or this community for women that is at my climbing gym, Momo. The basic idea is that I wanted to get more women into climbing and strengthen the community of female climbers in Stockholm. So it's sort of like this facilitator for women to connect in the climbing space. And we started in 2023 and just had like a few participants that we had for a year. And then it's sort of grown from there. So now we're a lot of people, but it's been so rewarding and so inspiring to follow their journey in climbing, from not feeling like they belong in climbing and sort of that the climbing gym isn't their space, to them feeling like, oh, this is where I belong, this is my space, and, you know, how they've developed as climbers and see this community grow. I think it's probably the most rewarding thing that I've done in climbing.
So let's talk a little bit about your evolution back to this moving from comp to outdoor climbing, sport climbing, and then into big route climbing. You talked about how there's not that much big route climbing in Sweden. Looking out into the world and being like, I want to go climbing on these big routes. And what were the opportunities that brought you there?
Well, first of all, as you sort of touched upon, I was very goal-oriented growing up, and I realized that I wanted to get away from that a little bit because I sort of have a vision instead of having all these goals all the time. So I set this vision for myself that I wanted to be able to do every discipline in climbing, and coming from a competition background and sport climbing background, I hadn't done any other disciplines in climbing. And honestly, I think that's been so motivating and so fun to learn these new skills and develop as a climber over the years and do these new things. So I first wanted to get into multi-pitch climbing, and then that turned into a bit more trad climbing and big wall climbing. So now I do a bit of everything.
And it seems like you are motivated to do these walls with other women climbers.
Yeah, so I think that ties into what we just talked about with this community initiative, and it's I really like climbing with other women, and I think it's a really powerful and cool experience to do these big wall projects together as a team of women. And I also like to showcase that, we can come together and do really badass things.
How would you characterize like the perfect partner for you? I mean, men or women, but what kind of aspect do you look for, and what's been successful when you've been on these climbs?
I think being competent, of course, and like the whole safety aspect, because you're having
kind of a baseline,
putting your life in someone else's hands, but
they know how to belay, things like that.
Yeah, and like you're sort of on the same level when it comes to how you want to do things in terms of efficiency and like rope work and climbing. But then I think what your vibe is really important too, because you're literally going to be in a very small space together up on the wall for a long time. So like that you go well together with not just the climbing, I think is important too.
What about you? What do you think you bring to the table as a partner?
Oh, well, hopefully I'm like good with the safety stuff. I think so.
You know how to belay, tie your knot, things like that.
Yeah. But I think I'm for the most part like stoked and positive and like hardworking on the wall. It's like bringing good vibes and trying really hard, which are things that I value as well.
I just had put out an episode with Timmy O'Neill, who's, I don't know if you know Timmy, but famous for talking, actually, kind of like me, I guess. And I kind of confronted him. I'm like, do you ever realize it's like too much? Like, maybe you should calm down. And he was like, oh yeah, totally. Like he's like, I meet people who talk more than me, and I'm like, oh my God, is that what I'm like? Do you have any like sort of red flags or whatever in your head of like, I do need to like calm this part of myself down, or right at this moment I'm getting a little too aggro? Like, what are your, we all have personality traits that maybe we need to control sometimes. Do you ever get so frustrated? I mean, whatever it happens to be, like, what's your kind of like, Matilda, like, take it down a notch here. You're starting to, that's starting to come out.
I think I can get like anxious if there's like bad weather rolling in and, this doesn't look really safe. And I think then it's like, yeah, I'd like to climb with someone that maybe is a bit more chill in that sense, that sort of balances it out. But I also do think it's good for safety to be like cautious and a little bit scared.
Yeah, that's the flip side of it. Yeah, how are you with fear? As you've gotten into trad climbing, or you did a recent trip to Madagascar that had a lot of ups and downs in terms of rock quality, in terms of bolting, things like that. How are you with the fear up there?
I think I'm pretty good with fear, and I rarely feel like scared when I'm on the wall. And I think that I'm good at like tapping into a good mindset when I'm climbing to be able to like manage risks in a safe way. But honestly, like before I started like multi-pitch climbing, I didn't know how I would be in those types of environments, like being several hundred meters up on the wall and trying hard. But I had some really good mentors, like getting me into that in like a safe way.
Yeah, it seemed like you can be somewhat analytic about it, and like again, some footage of you trad climbing. You're just talking about the risks very matter of factly. This is what you have to do. You can't fall there. Things like that. Is that part of maybe this business economics background and things like that you can kind of analyze?
Please don't label me as a business and economics.
You just look at climbing as an equation on a piece of paper is what I'm getting at.
I know.
A bunch of numbers stacked in a Excel file.
No, I think I'm way more like the soft values and like the emotional part of climbing. But I do, I think calculated risk. It's not something. Risk is not something that I feel like I have. I need to push in my climbing. I'm more interested in trying hard, physically and mentally, but not pushing risks. And I did, dip my toes into that a little bit last year when I was doing more trad climbing, because some of the harder climbs in Bohuslän on the west coast of Sweden are like the consequences are high if you fall.
Yeah, it seems to go with that territory a lot of times. Hard trad climbing can often have poor gear because it's why it's hard is there's nothing to stick your fingers into, and therefore there's nowhere to put gear. So it depends on whether they bolt. And it seems like there are areas in Sweden that are fairly ethical about putting bolts in or using them sparingly or not at all. Is that the case?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like Bohuslän has a very strong ethic of natural protection. So most of the climbing there is, it's just natural gear placements, meaning that it can be very long runouts.
So I want to talk a little bit about Madagascar. We're going to wrap it up here in a little bit, but I just talked to Anna, your partner, Anna Hazlett, about that trip, and we talked at length, and it was a pretty important trip for her as far as just pushing her own sort of limits and abilities. She spoke super highly of you as being, a great partner, being solid and, kind of not flapping in the wind like she felt like she was a little bit. And I actually want to really focus in on something she told me is that, like, you guys had switched over to a route and were having trouble with the pitch, and then you were like, well, Andre's done this pitch, and then you got some information from him, and basically he said, oh, no, I hadn't. I couldn't do it. But the rest of us would have just, like, ran away when Adam Andre's like, I can't do it. Like, forget about it. So talk a little bit about that. Just put throwing yourselves at this wall, even though there was this massive uncertainty about what it was. It was repeating a route, but it was a route that seemed to be a little bit sketchy in whether or not it was still there almost.
Yeah, so we were in Madagascar in June, and before that trip, I had a pretty severe knee injury, so I wasn't even sure I would be able to go. But then Anna and I made, plans to go, so that was like my big motivation throughout the injury, and I was on a very aggressive rehab plan to be able to go there. And going to Madagascar was really like venturing into the unknown. Like there's not that much information about a lot of the climbs there, so we had this objective, but then we decided to switch to a route called Air Madagascar because the bolts were just so corroded on the other route that we wanted to try. And the route had no repeats, even though it looked like very well bolted, and like the information seemed like good enough, like you needed an 80-meter rope and like the quick draws. And then when we started climbing it turned out that there was a lot of information missing. Like they'd used removable bolts, so the bolts were super far apart, like to the point where it was almost like, oh, this is really sketchy. And then we got to the crux pitch of the climb, and then we found out that Andra had tried it and couldn't pass this section. We were like, oh my God.
Yeah. 0 on the O scale or whatever, like not undoable.
Yeah.
But what happened?
We spent like several days trying to figure something out, but it's like something must have broken. I don't know, because it's literally just a blank wall. But then we found a way to free the pitch by like traversing out and joining a neighboring route, which I think was fair because then we could like free the climb with this variation. But let's just say when we found out that Andra couldn't do it, like it felt like all bets were off.
Yeah, completely. So, we got that story in another episode, and we could, if people go back and listen to that, they can fill it in. Like I said, Anna was very complimentary of you and felt as very privileged to have you there with her and climbing with her. And so what was, your perspective on her? I mean, if it was awful, you can just say that. She doesn't listen. No, I'm just kidding. I just saw her last night. But yeah, just, her perspective of pushing herself was kind of amazing. Was it? Were you aware of it? Like, was it internal for her? Did you know what she was kind of up against as far as like sending those pitches? It sounded incredible what she did.
So this was the first time we were actually climbing together.
Sure.
We were suddenly
like
in
a taco stand or something like that. Yeah,
in Madagascar, trying really, really hard. And I was so impressed with her because I think she succeeded her expectations on every single day on the wall. And I think her ability to try like that hard was like, I don't think I've seen that before. And I think she was so supportive of me as well when we were climbing. So it was really good.
You guys have plans?
To climb other things.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna meet up with her here, but unfortunately, she's
wrist. Yeah,
she's injured. So I was hoping to climb with her, but I think it will be for.
Yeah, she left it all on the table. On that climb because she's come home,
injured.
Injured from trying so hard. I asked her, other women that she was, because you guys met at like a Mexican place or something in Vegas, or just on a random thing, and then ended up hooking up for that. I asked her like, well, who else, do you want to run into in the next taco place that you are going to climb with? What about you? Like, who out there on your list would be someone you haven't climbed with that, even here on the team or elsewhere that you're like, oh, I gotta hook up with her or him.
I would really like to climb with Amity.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That'll be easy. I mean,
but I think
easy to to get a climb together. Not easy to follow her necessarily, but
no, I think she's amazing, like such an accomplished climber. So I would love to climb with her. And then, I mean, I'd love to climb with Janja, the goat. Now that she's climbing a little bit more outside.
Right.
One day.
So you're 33. I asked you that before that. You had to actually think about it for a second. We all do sometimes. And you've been at this for a while now, and you know your career's moving along. So how do you sort of feel about your legacy? It's not over. You're not like deep in this thing. You're not like an old climber that we're talking about the past. But you do have this. You're representing in a lot of ways. You know, I started with this whole Swedish thing. Like you're a little bit of the face of that climbing right now. You're representing these people well. How important is it to you, and how do you kind of assess the moves you've made as a professional climber, as a representative for women, as a representative again for these kids who are coming up through climbing in your country, and for the face of sort of Swedish climbing?
I think it's been like way less calculated than you make it sound, but I'm really
spreadsheets.
That's no. I think I'm just really, really passionate about climbing, and I feel like I'm in a really good spot, like in my life and in climbing, and I just really want to give something back to the community. And you know, I'm really happy that people see me as a role model in climbing, and hopefully, you know, I can continue pushing my own climbing and doing things for the community as well. I mean, I do think, you know, it's good to have like a vision or dream big, but I think right now feel like I'm in a really good path and a good spot. So I really hope to continue on this path and like climb hard and do good things.
Thanks, Matilda.
Thank you.
What are those? The horns on your helmet, are they simply decorative, or are you going to use them to impale people, or what?
Horns happen to be the latest fashion.
You can't walk around with horns on your helmet. It looks ridiculous.
Because you're such a fashionista?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you would probably know that fashion is about taking chances, experimenting, daring to be bold, while at the same time, of course, you had to wear something that you feel comfortable in.
Well, I sure wouldn't feel comfortable with those horns on my helmet.
Me neither.